Capitol Hill Republican senators, including John McCain, on new proposed VA legislation.
I'm joined by my colleagues, Senator Burr of North Carolina, Senator Coburn of Oklahoma, and my colleague from Arizona, Senator Flake. We are all very aware of the ongoing scandal that has beset our treatment of the men and women who have served in the military. This scandal and now has reached proportions where the American people are deeply angered and are demanding that we make changes to fix this problem. There is even charges that in our home state of Arizona that 40 people died as while awaiting care. I don't know of an issue more serious than this for the American people as to how we treat those who have been willing to go out and serve and sacrifice on behalf of their nation. And I especially want to thank my three colleagues, including Senator Burr, whose role on the Veterans Affairs Committee is vital, and I'd like to thank Dr. Coburn, who understands and has been involved in these issues of the Veterans Administration for many, many years, and my colleague Senator Flake, who has also taken a lead role in trying to address this terrible, almost tragedy, could be described as a tragedy that has afflicted our care for our veterans. And we're introducing the Veterans Choice Act of 2014. The bill will give eligible veterans greater flexibility when choosing their medical care and increase accountability and transparency within the VA to ensure that it delivers quality care to our veterans in a timely fashion. The bill would accomplish these goals by the following. It would empower veterans who can't schedule an appointment within a reasonable time or live too far away from the VA medical facility to exercise the choice, I emphasize the choice, of getting medical care from any doctor in a Medicare or TRICARE program. I've always believed that veterans could choose and should choose, and that's where I first proposed it in 2008 when I ran for the presidency of the United States. Give these veterans a choice card so they could take that choice card and present it to the health care provider. Prohibit scheduling or wait time metrics, goals that could be used as factors in determining performance awards or bonuses. Require the Secretary of the Veterans Administration to establish policy that outlines penalties an employee would be subjected to if he or she falsifies data, including civil penalties, suspension, or termination. Finally, empower the Secretary of the Veterans Administration to remove any top executive at the VA if the Secretary determines that his or her performance warrants removal. Following removal, the Secretary will certify and notify Congress of the removal and the reason for the removal. This program will sunset after 2 years and require the Inspector General to audit it every 2 years. Unlike Senator Sanders' bill, this legislation addresses the root causes of current VA scandal and empowers veterans with greater flexibility to get the quality medical care that he or she deserves. Finally, I'd like to emphasize again, the Inspector General just last week reported that 1,700 veterans who were awaiting primary care appointments in the VA hospital in Phoenix, Arizona, were not placed on the electronic waiting list. As the IG report stated, quote, most importantly, these veterans continue to be at risk of being forgotten or lost in Phoenix HCS's convoluted scheduling process. And as I mentioned earlier, the Inspector General is now investigating 42 VA facilities across the United States, and the Inspector General has, quote, identified instances of manipulation of VA data that distort the legitimacy of reported waiting times. This legislation squarely addresses the root causes of the tragic circumstances that bring us here today. Senator Burr.
John, thank you very much. Just a few things to add to it. John mentioned Phoenix. When the Phoenix investigation began, we had already had 12 reports from either the IG the Office of Special Counsel or medical investigations that pointed to exactly the same things that came out in the interim report. Yet for those since 2010, senior leadership at the VA ignored attempting to make any changes, to make any reforms, to address any of the problems that all of these investigations raised. That's why we're here. This bill is very targeted. It's focused specifically on fixing a short-term problem, which is how do we get veterans the care they deserve, and to allow the VA leadership to make the systemic changes that they need to make, addressed by the Inspector General. Now, some on Capitol Hill have claimed this is all about money. Let me remind you that since 2010, in the healthcare account alone, the VA has carried over $4.6 billion and is estimated this year to carry over another $450 million. These are appropriated dollars that they've determined are not needed for the delivery of healthcare to our nation's veterans. As a matter of fact, there's been no investigation that said there was a shortage of money. Every one of the investigations pointed to things like ghost clinics, double scheduling, veterans who were left off the rolls, or request dates that were changed so they met within a 14-day time frame, leaving us in an unknown situation as to how long many of these veterans waited for anything from primary care to oncology needs that they might have had medically. So what does this bill do? It's choice, it's transparency, and it's change. It's not encompassing everything that Congress would like to pass as it relates to VA legislation, but it addresses the urgent things needed right now. And I'm proud to announce that as of this press conference, the American Legion, AMVETS, and Concerned Veterans of America have publicly supported this bill. And we hope there are going to be more veterans organizations before we mark this bill up. Thank you. Tom.
I didn't ever serve in the military, but like many of you, I have the benefits of living in a great country because people put on that uniform and serve for me. To me, it would seem that if you're a combat veteran of this country, you ought to be the first in line, not the last in line. Your access ought to be guaranteed, not for nominal care, but for the best care. What we have right now is a system that isn't working to give and live up to the commitments, to equal the commitments that our veterans have given us. This bill is a focused bill. It's about maintaining the VA and making it better. But it's also about honoring the sacrifice of the veterans who have served this country when they have a need, to get it addressed. Not to have to wait, not to be a manipulated number, but to have access to the care that not only they need, but they deserve more than any of us. Any of us. So I'm proud of the work that we've done. There's lots to do. I would leave you with a little tidbit of information. The average practitioner in the VA hospital sees half the number of patients that the average practitioner outside of the VA hospital sees. Annals of Family Medicine, published 2 years ago. So it's not about the number of doctors. It's about actually working and getting the job done. We have some great physicians in the VA system. We have some great hospitals, but we have problems. This bill is about addressing those problems.
I'll be very, very brief. If you can imagine being a veteran in Arizona, Phoenix area, and waiting an average of 115 days for an appointment, for some specialties much longer. You can imagine living in my hometown, Snowflake, and having to get in a van and travel 3 hours just for a routine x-ray. If this legislation passes, that will no longer be the case. Veterans will be guaranteed, if wait time is longer than it should be, they'll be able to see somebody else. That's what we've got to do to fix the system.
Questions?
Senator, thank you. Technically, I'm told that if you read the VA regs right now, veterans waiting longer than 30 days can already access a private doctor. Could you describe some of the mechanics of how your choice card would differ from the system that's in place now? And if I might, please, Senator Burr, you're on Veteran Affairs. Could you address, when Senator McCain is finished, could you address what happens to the funding of the 27 community clinics? Do you see Republicans changing the committee votes that those CBOCs are funded?
Well, first of all, that is up to the discretion of the VA, this ability to get care or not, and most times they don't get that. Second of all, we want to make this mandatory, and we also want to make it within a certain geographic situation as well, that it would be required. So they may be eligible in some instances, but it's not happening. This legislation would make it happen, maybe.
Yeah, let me just add, this empowers the veteran to make the decision versus relying on a bureaucrat to determine that they want to divert money from the VA facility to outside payment, because that's the way they're structured within the VA. From a standpoint of I take it you're talking about the VITR initiative for more CBOCs. We're very supportive of that. I won't tell you that in an amendment process on the floor that it wouldn't be part of this bill. It's very pertinent. But we wanted to keep this bill focused just on issues that we thought addressed today's biggest challenge, and that was getting veterans seen. But as a committee and as Republicans, we're very supportive of the expansion of the CBOCs. Yes, ma'am.
Just so I'm clear, in terms of funding the provisions in this bill, you would use prior year money, or how would you go about paying for
Go ahead, John.
this?
You want to?
Well, there's $4 billion that hadn't been spent in the last 5 years. There's $480 million that isn't going to be spent this year. There's plenty of money to do this. Money is not the problem at the Veterans Administration. It's management and accountability and honesty in treating and giving the veterans what we need. I don't expect there to be a significant problem with it. First of all, it has to get set up. It's a 2-year bill. It sunsets after 2 years. So that gives the VA time to make what they need to do. But there's plenty of money in the VA organization today to handle this.
Do you oppose then any efforts to pay for this or other?
It's paid for already. Again, we have a problem in the VA system. The first thing we hear is it's money, but they're not spending the money. So that's a management competency level issue. So where's the competency? I mean, I'd remind you, we got 4 VA hospitals under construction right now that are $1 trillion over budget. $500 million over budget in Denver alone. I mean, it's called competency. And what we have to do is demand accountability. There's plenty of money.
You can see why I recommend strongly that Dr. Coburn be the next Secretary of Veterans Affairs.
And some of us are lobbying for John McCain to be Jay Carney's replacement. Let me just say that the administration's testified every year in front of the committee that they had sufficient funds in the health care account. And what I don't want people to walk away from and think that the VA is all about health care. 50% of the VA is about benefits. And the VBA side is as broken as the VHA side. The VHA side, the health care piece, is about 43% of the VA budget. The other 7% is scattered through education and job training and other programs. Health care is exactly what it sounds like. It's health care, but it's also the homelessness programs that are run through the VA.
What's your plan for trying to get action on this in a Senate that has a majority of Democrats? What Democrats are you talking to? Is Senator Sanders one of them?
Well, we've all spoken to a number of Democrats. They're very interested in joining with us in an effort to get legislation accomplished. I can't specifically state their positions, but I know this, that we are eager to sit down with our Democrat colleagues and get this bill to the floor. And I believe through the amendment process and through debate, which Senator Harry Reid is not allowed on other pieces of legislation, is vital. because there's a lot of good ideas out there. And this is our blueprint, and we're proud of it. But we're willing to listen to debate and amendments. And if Harry Reid will agree to that, I believe that we could get a VA, a Veterans Choice Act through this Congress in a week.
Let me just add to that Senator Rubio has 10 Democratic sponsors to the Accountability Act, and that may be a tougher swallow for some of the Democrats than the Choice Act would be.
Why would that be tougher?
Just simply because it changes employment rules, which I think Democrats have always been suspect of. But I think that what we see is broad-based support, not just outside of Congress, but inside Congress, to empower our veterans to make choices as it relates to their health care.
You know, I just say one thing on this. Is there an issue morally more important than meeting the needs of our veterans in this country? The foundation of having other people serve depends on how well we take care of those that have. And if we can't see the leadership, either on our side or their side, to come together to fix what's really wrong, not a Christmas tree bill that satisfies everybody's wants and wishes, but actually is a problem-solving bill, then shame on the U.S. Congress and shame on the U.S. Senate.
Thank you.
John Allway back.
Regarding the request by the administration for money to hire more doctors, are you saying that because there's all this money in the health account that's unspent, that some of that money could be used to fill those vacancies?
It could, but first thing I would ask you to go and look at is how many patients and how many procedures. The average operating room in a VA hospital does about 60% of what the average operating room does around the country. So do we need more people, or do we need the people there doing more work? Same thing on primary care appointments. They work at half the rate of which doctors outside of the VA work. So do we need more working at half the rate, or do we need the ones that are there working at the rate the rest of the country works at? I don't think there's a problem. Other than management.
One of the things we do under transparency is we will require the VA to supply to Health and Human Services on an annual basis in the same data set that non-VA hospitals report their data on patient quality and institution quality. We're going to ask them to report the same thing, which is going to begin to give us the data that we need to make assessments as to whether understaffing is a problem. But it's important that as we talk about other additions to VA, whether that's in personnel or whether it's in additional changes, that we actually wait for the Inspector General to come out with his full report. I believe that if you're going to address changes in 151 institutions, and that's just the hospital alone, we probably are going to need an independent audit of those facilities by an outside third-party entity that can tell us what's broken in each individual place, because I think what the IG is finding is, yeah, there's some systemic things across, but there's also a process that is different at every VA facility. And it's going to be absolutely vital that we figure out how to get a handle on those differences, because without knowing those, it's hard for us to then judge what types of changes we need to legislate.
Let me just give you a little vignette. 2 orthopedic surgeons, and I'll find out which hospital, VA hospital as well, use their residents to help clean operating rooms so they could actually treat the patients in a faster and better way, so they could actually utilize their time to actually help people. They got put on administrative leave for using their residents to help clean an operating room so they could help somebody, because the regular operating room staff was so slow. Is that where we want to send veterans? Should they get the greatest care, the best care? Should they be in front of us when it comes to care? I think they should be in front of me and every member of my family.
Really, somewhere in the back of this old mind of mine, when I wasn't a reporter in Washington, I recall during in the 80s, during the Reagan and Bush presidencies, talk of, because there were problems with the VA healthcare system back then, talk of just sort of closing down the VA hospitals in a sense and letting veterans go to the private sector, where they would supposedly, presumably, get better treatment. Why not just scrap the whole system in the long run?
Because for several reasons, but one reason of great importance is there are certain areas which only the VA has the talent and expertise. traumatic brain injury, spinal cord problems, PTSD, prostheses. There are a number of areas that really the VA is the place. And I'm afraid if you did away with a lot of that, then obviously we would lose that ability to treat our veterans, particularly the war wounded. But with the choice that we have now with this proposal, if a veteran wants to go to a health care provider and he has that's Medicare or TRICARE, then that veteran can choose that. Because I would argue that there are many health care providers that are as good or better in other areas. In other words, the veteran should have the choice of where he or she can get the best treatment. That's what this is all about.
And this is limited. This is limited geographically, or if you're denied access on a timely basis. So we're not trying to undermine the VA. We're trying to improve the VA, but we're also trying to improve access at the same time.
Okay? Yes,
Thank you.
One more.
Thank you. Could I ask you, besides the extra hiring of doctors and nurses, what in the Sanders bill you all disapprove of? And also, could I ask you about Sergeant Bergdahl? Are there any, what's your reaction?
I'll let John take Bergdahl, but we're not here to talk about the Sanders bill. We're here to talk about what we think is a very targeted solution to a real problem that the IG and a bunch of other investigations have shown.
There's a shortage of physicians in this country, and it's going to get worse. We're doing a study right now. We're getting ready to release a report from our office on physician training and supplementation by the federal government. What's going to happen? So the VA is going to have to compete, whether you have more money in there or not. But I'm telling you, the problem right now isn't physicians. The problem is the work rate, on average, in the VA.
In the case of Sergeant Bergdahl, this agreement is, in my view, puts future men and women who are serving in the military at great risk. These individuals were judged, as in Guantanamo, frequently, that if they were released, it would cause a great risk to the men and women who are serving on the battlefield. These individuals, as Senator Graham calls them, the Fab Five, I believe, or these individuals will be able to move around Qatar, and after 1 year, according to the Qatar spokesman, they will be able to go back to Afghanistan. 30% of those who have left Guantanamo have already re-entered the fight. This is the hardest and toughest of all. These are wanted war criminals. One of them is supposedly guilty of murdering thousands of Shiite Muslims while he was in charge outside of, I believe, Kandahar. So this decision to bring Sergeant Bergdahl home, and we applaud that he is home, is ill-founded, it is a mistake, and it is putting the lives of American servicemen and women at risk, and that, to me, is unacceptable to the American people.
Can I follow up on this?
Yeah.
These were Taliban leaders.
No, they were Al-Qaeda, members of Al-Qaeda, too. Yeah.
They're listed as Taliban leaders.
They were associated with and part of Taliban. I'm sure you are aware that in 2001, the Taliban and Al-Qaeda were working together, which is the reason why we went there. These individuals were working with Al-Qaeda.
But they're, in a lot of ways, some people would suggest their only beef with the United States is that they were held in Guantanamo for...
These people have dedicated their lives to destroying us. These people have dedicated their very existence. Why do you think that when the judgment was made that if they released them, it would pose a great risk to the United States of America?
The Taliban.
They are Taliban and Al-Qaeda. Don't you understand that? Were you around? Yeah, like you said, you're an old man. You might remember that in 2001, Al-Qaeda found a haven with the Taliban. That's why we initially invaded Afghanistan. To somehow separate these people from Al-Qaeda is just damn foolishness. Yes.
Can we do one more? Okay. I understand your problem with giving up the 5 Taliban cabinet members, it's very clear. I still can't get my head around applauding that Bergdahl's home and opposing the swap. Should he still be in captivity under these circumstances, or should he not?
I think that the deal should not have been made, as I've said many times, but I would make every effort and continue to make every effort to bring him home. Thank you.